I'm live, and I believe it's working. I've got a whole bunch of tabs open now about why isn't my microphone capturing audio correctly. And it wasn't just this microphone, it was all my microphones. And then what I did was I unplugged the microphone 3 or 4 times and then plugged it back in, and then it worked. So who knows what is going on? You be the judge of that. And actually, you do have to be the judge of that because I can't actually tell if my audio is working. I think it is.
Capturing up.
It is. It is. Excellent. I'm thrilled. Absolutely thrilled to see that my audio is working. I put on a t-shirt to start the day, but I realized I wanted a little more. So I'm wearing a scarf. I'm going to finish this old tea, and we're going to go into the new tea. Old tea complete. Here's the teapot. Here's the pouring of the tea. We all know that that's what we're here for. Oh, did I just do this just for me? Nope, it says public. Okay, good. This is available for everyone. This live pouring of the tea. And it's a big pour. I don't know if that's going to pick up on my mic. Oh, crap. I literally did just pour over my keyboard. So this is the fun thing of live shows, is sometimes the host is a moron. And he pours... Let's turn that off. He pours tea on his expensive keyboard, his ergonomic keyboard, and then he has to, in the midst of the live show, he has to go and get a towel. I guess I could use this nice scarf I'm wearing. No, I'm gonna go get a towel. Y'all can sit here while I just talk about this hilarious happenstance. You know, a joke about pouring over the keyboard and how daring and how courageous that is of me. Some people often, I think they think it's just, that's puffery. He's not actually doing that daring kind of thing. And today I've proven this is the only show with the balls to not only pour hot tea over a keyboard, but also to then spill it on the keyboard and have to end mid-show. I mean, how many live shows do you get to tune into on a Friday where that happens? I submit very few. Maybe on a Saturday night. Very few live on a Friday whilst you're at work. This is my business. This is what I do. People reach out to me and they're like, I can help you have 60 qualified, high-paying client leads each week. And I tell them, no thanks, I've got that handled. I pour hot tea over my keyboard and then do a live show about it. And they don't understand my business model, and neither do I, frankly. Okay, tea's been poured. I think my keyboard's all right. I'm a little nervous to... Let's shake it. I'm a little nervous to turn it back on, because if there's still water in there, the sensitive microchips will be destroyed. But let's do it anyhow. Boop. There, I've turned it on. We'll find out. Let's see if I can type. Can I type? Not yet. It doesn't look like I'm able to type that. Can I type here? Nope. Oh, the keyboards aren't happy. It's got a red flashing light. So, maybe this is my life now. Did that turn it on? Maybe this is the live show where I wreck. Okay, I've turned you on. Okay, you're flashing. You're flashing. Hey, Lydia. Can I? Oh, I can type. I can type, and I will do so. Okay, good. Excellent. The keyboards are working. I spilled the tea, but I came through on the other side. Phew. What a way to start the day. Let's take a sip of this tea. I've got a few topics for today. This is a bit of an early show, and I'm going to end early because I've got a friend of mine and a former client coming over to look at my house because we want to do some renovations. So we're going to end at 11. So if you have stuff you're dying to find out about or jokes you're dying to make them now. Now is the time. Carpe that diem. Hard. What's this week held for me before I get into any of our topics? It's held, it's held a lot of holding. So in our program, The Forge, we're at about the halfway and change mark. And this is the point where a couple things predictably happen for everyone in the program. And this isn't predictable to The Forge, this is predictable to literally everything we do in life. This is the point where people have either often kind of reached a moment where they're like, this has been good, but I'm not quite getting what I want, but it's fine. And then they're like, okay with that. I'm okay with how it's gone, and I'm okay with how it's going. Or they get to the point where they're like basically resigned. I was hoping I would get something different from this, but I'm not, so I guess that's fine. Or they've kind of like taken a swing in their life. They've tried to have things go different, and it didn't quite work out the way they wanted it to. And they're feeling frustrated with themselves. They're like, I hate this. I did the thing, and I failed at it, and I feel bad about it. I'm going to stop caring so much. And there's like a billion different ways that this kind of energy can show up. What matters most is not looking through the lens of, do I do that, or do I do any of those? What the opportunity is to look through the lens of, how do I do? What's my version of that? Not do I do a version of that, but how? How do I do a version of that? What is my version of that? And if you practice that way, you might see something for yourself. And so the nature of this kind of energy is that we get really good at being fine with it. Things didn't really go the way I wanted them to, but I'm okay with it. And our job as the people leading and holding this container called the Forge is to confront people with that so that they can actually face it fully and choose something more powerful for them. Not more powerful for us, but if they want things to go different, to get clear that that energy is going to have things go the same way it always does. So when we do that work with people, it drives up resistance, it drives up shame, it drives up guilt, it drives up all manner of like stuff. And when I or Bay or both of us are reflecting that to people, it's intense. And it's intense the same way it's intense when you feel called out for something. We're working very hard not to leave someone in the experience of feeling called out. But anytime you shine any kind of light on a blind spot for someone, it's going to be really glaring. It's hard. It's vulnerable. It's like, I feel like everyone's been seeing this and I can't see it. And everyone's telling me this is the thing, but I can't see it and I don't understand. And like, I feel defensive. Like, fuck you. I'm just meant to believe what you say or trust what you say. All of that sort of stuff. So it demands a tremendous amount of energy for us to hold that kind of container and bring that in front of people. And frankly, and this holds true in any kind of leadership conversation, frankly, it's much easier not to do that. It's much easier and more comfortable and safer for us just be like, fuck it. You know what? Some people are going to get the gift of this work and other people won't, and who are we to care? Doesn't matter. What's the big deal? 80% is fine. If 80% of the people that come through our program, their lives change, that's all good. Before I go any further, that would be delightful and delicious for like the part of me that just wants to have life be easy and simple and relaxing and just let me play video games and drink and be like a slug. Not even a slug. Just let me just have a normal, nice life. But I'm committed to leadership, and as someone committed to leadership, I make my choice. I choose how I show up from somewhere other than my internal feelings exclusively. And the place that I choose from is the stand, the promise we make in the Forge, which is you will not leave the way you came in. And so even and especially when people have a lot of resistance to this and are like, this is the way it is, or you don't know me, or blah, 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 whatever the story is that holds them here in the story, we choose to confront them and then be with them through that confrontation. So I've got phone calls over the course of the rest of the day to kind of support people that we drove some stuff up with to keep going through that process. And then we're off to support people doing the same kind of work with ayahuasca at Rhythmia in Costa Rica. So it's been a week of a lot of heavy lifting. It's felt like one of my coaches and Bay's coach currently, at the end of a long weekend of training coaches and leadership, she would sometimes say like, wow, I really like it when the work works me. It's like when you go to the gym and you really push and you leave and you're just exhausted and you're like, hell yeah, I did something. That's how I think both Bay and I feel this week. Plus we got our own stuff going on, right? Like we're doing all this work and then we're living lives. We got to pay taxes. We got to manage getting the dog taken care of as we go on a trip. We got to deal with our own like relational dynamics and all of that sort of stuff. So it's a week with a lot of stuff up. That's how I'm sliding into the weekend, and then I'm traveling away to Costa Rica. And I want to be here. I want to do this live. I want to talk about this stuff. It's fun. So that's the path of leadership. Is there's always going to be an easier, simpler path. Always. That's like an inevitable. It's a given once you start to choose into leadership. And the transformational leader chooses something other than the given, simpler, easier path. Until they can't. Maybe there's a point they realize I am exhausted and frankly, I'm unwilling. I'm at my capacity. I'm not willing to keep, choosing. Screw it. I don't want to choose leadership. I'm just going to, I'm going to leave people to do whatever they do, and that's okay too. We have to give ourselves permission sometimes to just be in that place. Just like sometimes you have to give yourself permission. I don't want to go to the gym today, and I'm not going to. Even though I know that I could, even though I know that I could lift more weights, I'm going to let myself off the hook. It's okay to do that. It's really important sometimes. Okay, well, I'm going to go right into our topics because science and because reasons. So first topic, let's go light first, and then I've got one from David, an old question he asked a while back that I don't think I answered, and then I got a question on my blog in response to an article I'd written quite a while back on responsibility that I want to come to. So first, though, testimonials. So I notice I get added by a lot of people on Facebook especially, but LinkedIn too. And a lot of those people are seeking to sell something. That's just the energy that they're bringing. And you can tell that they're seeking to sell something primarily as their prime motivation because it says that in their banner. And it might not expressly say those words, but the energy of their banner is saying that. It's saying that. And so that might look like millionaire, blah, blah, blah. I help coaches book blah, 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 blah a week. So there's like what I do as a business person, and then their little circle, their bubble showing their face shows them like handshaking a billionaire or something like that. So I see a lot of these people come across my desk. And then I also I have a lot of coaches that have just friended me. And so I'm present often to like the energy that is being put out into the world. And what I'm intending to do here is distinguish something I notice, share my own judgment about it in a distinguished way so that I'm not just dumping my judgment, but I'm acknowledging it's there, and then share what I see missing, and then finally what I think is a more powerful way to show up in the world. So, but before we can go to that end point, I got to start with my judgment. And my judgment is that like what I see in a lot of this is just people trying to get into the pants, the metaphorical pants of my wallet. Good morning, Andrew. Or the wallet of the public. There's not a lot of interest in like sharing who they really are as a human being beyond, well, who I am as a human being is someone that helps you make $1 billion. And there's not a lot of interest in exploring or discovering or learning about who you are as a human being beyond, tell me about your business, let's talk about business. You get the idea, right? So there's a little bit of the part of who you are and who I am as a human being, but most of it's pretty devoid. So that's the first piece of judgment I have is when this lands, I'm like, that feels kind of gross, pretty singular, pretty meh, and I'm kind of turned off by it. The second thing I notice is when people share testimonials, fundamentally what I feel is that this is about you proving to me that you are worth a certain amount of money. It's sort of like social proofing. Look at all these people that have said Adam is awesome. You should hire Adam because all these people did, right? So there's like a degree of convincing in a testimonial, proving myself to you. There's a more subtle way of doing this same thing, and that more subtle way is sort of celebrating your client but doing so in such a way that you're actually talking, like, you're not celebrating your client selflessly. You're celebrating your client because they're your client, because it says that you're a good coach. That's the energy that's underneath this. And so that feels really gross to me, because it's kind of using your client and your client's success a little bit like prostitutionally. You're kind of prostituting their success a little bit that way. Now, it doesn't mean you can't celebrate your client's success. Again, we're still in the frame of my judgment here, so I just want to be clear about this. I'm getting this out so I can then talk about distinguish and get us somewhere different. But like, what's really happening is like, look at how awesome my client is. I want to celebrate them for making the bold, courageous decision to hire me. Okay, what you're celebrating is you being hired and trying to get more people to do that, if we were honest with what's happening. Or I want to celebrate my client through months of coaching with me and difficult work. They did this, they blah, 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 blah. So there's always this hook in there of like the coach. It's about the coach. It's not really about the client. And we've had that experience at work, most of us, where you're a member of a team and your manager gets up to celebrate the team. And then the celebration, the acknowledgement, ends up being surreptitiously about the manager. And it's gross. It's yucky. So I got a judgment about that. I'm not a huge fan. I don't really love it. It doesn't really vibe with me. And so that's my judgment about it. Underneath that, what I can see is that a lot of people are probably just doing their best. And they're trying to make their way in a world, and they're trying to like succeed, and they don't really it's hard to figure out how to do this. And further, my hunch is twofold. One is that this stuff works to some extent in the short term. It must, because we see it everywhere. And we know word of mouth advertising works to some extent. And so testimonials are kind of like some word of mouth advertising, blah, blah, blah. And the second thing I assume is that it takes a lot of trust to play a longer term relational game. In the short term, this is like obvious. Like I post these, I reach out to 28 people, one of them says yes, and then boom, it worked. That's the results, just keep doing it. So I recognize underneath my judgment, I can really get these are just people trying their best, and they're trying to find their way, and they're trying to make some money, and they're trying to earn a living, and that's okay. So I can distinguish my judgment from that underlying truth. I can hold it with grace. I can hold it with love and sacredness. And I can also see that it is tough to choose a different way of showing up when the world at large around us is shoving us in this direction. The world at large is like, yo, do this. Here's all the evidence. That's what you're meant to do. I just don't think it works. I think more often what happens is that people have the experience I'm describing, by and large. Especially when it's that icky stuff, but even when it's just like, I don't know about you, but when I see coaches post testimonials on Facebook, I just scroll past it because I'm like, who cares? It maybe if I'm looking for that, but for the most part, it just, there's like a to it. So that doesn't have to be everyone, but my hunch is that a lot more people have that experience than the other side of it, where they're like, oh my God, what a coincidence. I've been looking for testimonials to support blah, 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 blah. So here's the thing I think, the opportunity that gets missed in a lot of this stuff. Morale, hello. You said, send me a friend request for your reading. No. If you want to give me a reading, send me your friend request and then you can send it to me. Or you can just put it right here. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if any of the rest of you have had this, but this is, Morale here is the third, maybe the fourth person in a row who's added me on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, then told me, I have a reading for you from the universe, and then, do you want it? And I say, whatever. Do you want, whatever, I'm ambivalent. I could care less one way or the other. And then they say, well, it's important I give it to you. And when I say, great, give it to me then, they tell me, well, it costs money. It's to me, that's a hilarious setup. How important is this? That money is in the way of it. If it's important, by all means, share it with me. And if that's why you're reaching out to me, by all means, bring it to me. But morale, no, is the answer to your request there. No, I will not send you a friend request. If you want to send me a reading, go right ahead. I'm not going to stop you from doing that. That is entirely in your power to do so. Tommy, you've been getting that too. Good morning, Tommy. So there's something. I don't know. Maybe this is the new thing, or maybe a bunch of astrologers lately have been like getting supported by someone, and this is the way to do it. This is the new way to get 658 hot astrology leads every hour. Here's the thing I think is drastically getting missed in all of these approaches, from like the slimy kind of I only want to connect with you, but actually I want to just sell to you, to the look at these testimonials about my client, which are secretly and kind of grossly about actually myself, all the way down to like just the well-intentioned, like just posting testimonials. The opportunity I think is getting missed is the opportunity to serve people here and now in this moment. And the coach that really taught me this was Steve Chandler. If any of you have followed, Steve Chandler wrote the book, he co-wrote it along with Rich Lippman, The Prosperous Coach. And Steve is less glamorous and less, I would say probably less magnetic than Rich Lippman, but I think he's really an absolute genius and well worth your time checking out. And when I first started interacting with Steve, the way it happened was one of his students just sent me a book, because she was the first person I'd ever reached out to and connected when I first thought about becoming a coach. Just out of the blue, one year, she was like, "What's your address?" I gave it to her. I hadn't talked to her in like a year, and she sent me his book, Wealth Warrior. Wealth Warrior's an incredible book. It's so amazing. And I liked it so much that I just reached out to Steve, and I sent him an email, and I was like, "You're awesome. I loved your book. Can we talk?" And Steve was like, "Sure." This is what I was doing back then. I was reading books by people I found inspiring, and then just reaching out to them and being like, "Can we get on the phone?" And then getting on the phone was kind of awkward, because we'd get on the phone and they'd be like, "So what do you want?" I'd be like, "I don't know." And then I'd have to generate something. Steve Chandler is amazing because no matter what your interaction with him, he's going to serve you. So the moment I emailed him, he sent me back a story about himself and then was like, "Let's get on the phone. Are you available now?" And then we got on the phone. We talked, and then he sent me a whole bunch of audios, like CDs and audios and MP3s, and he sent me over email a PDF copy of his new book, The Prosperous Coach. And so he hadn't asked me for anything. He hadn't mentioned any testimonials. He hasn't done anything like that. He is just really standing for the power of service. Serve people every chance you get. And when people turn to posting testimonials or trying to sell stuff or writing a story that they think will hook a client in and help the client out there see how the coach is the good one for them, or blah, 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 all of the opportunity for service gets missed. When I see those testimonials scroll by quickly, there's nothing that serves me in that. And so we are missing the opportunity to really serve someone. And it is our capacity to serve them that has people start to be like, "Yo, this person's cool. I want to spend a little more time around them." That's how we really build relationship in this work, is by serving people freely, just from the joy it provides us. Not to get anywhere, but because we genuinely believe it would serve them. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff we have to do once we're clear that that's what we're going to start putting our attention towards, rather than trying to sell or prove our value or social proving or any of this other stuff. But the first step, so it's not the only step, but the first step has to be that we start to create that as a stand for ourselves. How can I serve people? And when we're putting something out, does this serve people? And is there a way I could serve people more, given what I'm looking at right now? So you can always argue anything you do serves people, right? I'm sharing what I'm up to, that serves people. Great, but is there a way I could more powerfully serve people? And so consequently, I don't tend to post much in the way of testimonials. And when I try to acknowledge my clients, I try to do so without mentioning that we work together at all. I just share a post of theirs and say, "This is amazing, it's worth reading." I let off anything else about that to the best of my ability. I'm still a human, I don't get this perfect. But what I want to do is create this idea of the possibility that's available to you and to me in us simply practicing service, rather than all that other gunk that we layer on top of it. Because what tends to happen is we're like, great service, and then we bolt that on top of our neediness around money, and how do I get clients though, really? And I can't trust this in the short term, I need some money. And so then we're trying to serve over top of all this other gunk. We actually have to drop all that other stuff first and just begin from the net place. What would most serve people? So there's a bunch of ways we can do that. But one last story I'll share here on this particular piece is this isn't an obvious thing. In fact, most coaches miss this opportunity. So I'm part of a group called the Essence of Mastery Summit, which is something happening in 2023 that you absolutely should come check out if you're a coach and you want to create some mastery. It's an opportunity to learn from a bunch of master certified coaches. There's only about 1,000, maybe 1,500 now of us in the world, which is crazy. And we're putting on a summit. You can come, listen to what we do. I'll be talking about creating clients, blah, 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 blah. There's going to be a bunch of awesome stuff there. I will be sharing more about this as time goes on. But the point here is not that. The point here is the person leading this was sending out these emails. And what I noticed was that the emails being sent out, the content of them was like, hey, this is a mastery happens at this point. Just want to make sure that you know you can sign up. And if you click through, then you will get a discount. Here's the link to the early bird sign up. So there's this conversation available that could be like, well, we are serving people. We're giving them a special link now that would allow them to get a discount. Awesome. So there is a degree of service there. But in that one email, if all they do is read that email and then walk away, they haven't been served. We've done nothing. We've just cluttered their inbox. And so I wrote to the person leading this a little nervously because I wasn't sure, is she open to this? Turns out she was absolutely open. But I said, look, I think we're missing an opportunity to really model what it is to truly put our attention on serving people. How could them receiving this email in their inbox be like something where they're like, fuck yeah, I'm so glad I got that email. I can't wait for the next one. Could we include in that email a little snippet of some of the magic that we're providing? Could we include in that email a little story or something that might help people see things in a different light? And that's where we want to look. We want to look like, does just getting this piece and nothing else serve people? And if you start to create your life and how you show up in the world through that lens, you become someone that's very magnetic. You become someone that people really want to spend time with because every moment they spend with you serves them. It supports them in some way. And that's incredible. And that is so foreign. For the most part, what we get is not selfless service. Not service given free out of love, but service so as to. Service as an attempt to then get you to do something. And so that's where we want to turn our attention to. How can I practice serving this person if this was the only thing I did with them? If they didn't click through or follow along, if they didn't do anything else, could I provide this communication in such a way that it would serve them? That would be a gift to them. That's a powerful place to show up. Hey, America. Nice to see you. Let's see what you've got here. Andrew, you wrote, I think the opportunity to show a conversation with the client, what they experienced, what they didn't get in the experience, and exploring it all is a fun thing to share with the world. It allows people to see the fullness of what happens in a coaching experience. It certainly can. And I'm going to keep pointing back to this internal stand that I think is so powerful for us to sit in. Anytime we take a stand, it doesn't mean that everything or even that some things are off the table. It might be like, hey, how can I most serve people right now? I really think it is to show conversation with the client, what they experienced, what they didn't get in the experience, explore, is it a fun way to see, blah, 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 all of that. I do that sometimes. But the difference here is that we're starting from checking our internal stand and seeing like, am I coming from a place that really serves people? Is this the most powerful way I could probably serve people right now? And then Andrew also writes, I've just listened to Steve Chandler's Joy of Selling and Wealth Warrior. When I first started listening to Steve, I thought he was boring, which he is. He's kind of droll and dry, and his voice is very like, this is Steve Chandler, hello, blah, 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 blah. It's very dry. But Andrew's saying, now I absolutely love all of his material, including his voice. His approach to serving and connecting is game-changing. Steve Chandler is like a very unassuming guy, and that's part of his magic, is because he's so like dour and you just gotta sing and dance and love music and blah blah. I'm not that good at a Steve Chandler impression, but like he kind of gets under the surface. He almost like sneaks his way in. So different coaches have different magic. Because of me, my energy, the voice that I have to be really, I have to make an effort to soften my edge. Because people already receive me as like a fairly sharp edge. And if I come in at them with a lot of rigor and heaviness, it's just gonna scar them. They're gonna get bruised, calloused, jaded, pushed back. Whereas Steve Chandler can be a little more direct, as can Bay, because they're gentler, softer. People aren't quite so like, whoa, what's this person gonna do to me? Lydia, you're saying regarding these astrologers, I get you are so beautiful. I want to be friends. Please send me a friend request. Do your own work, people. You fucking send a friend request. I'm not sending you one. If you want to be a friend, send your own friend request, and then I will ignore it. It's so funny, isn't it? That's a really that's a way of being that is quite prevalent in the world. Like I am making an assumption here that these people are just scammers, and that's what's going on here. But like if we took it out of that assumption, you could see there's this real, like, often the way we make requests of people is through this kind of energy. Like, can you tell me that you want to take me out for dinner, instead of saying I want to go out for dinner with you? So we resist the vulnerability of making a request directly. Instead, we make this sort of like two-level request. It's a bit obfuscated, which is confusing and weird, and it has most of us put our guard up when we're like, what is going on? And it's also a bit of a turnoff, energetically speaking. It's a turnoff when people kind of give you a request like that, as opposed to just directly telling you what they want. Direct requests are a gift to offer people. Okay. So that's how I am about testimonials. Andrew, yes. Andrew's asking, Adam, will you be a part of the Essence of Mastery in 2023? So I think the 2022 one is just finished. 2023 happens in June. And we've just got the photos and stuff, so that'll be getting set up, and then I'll start inviting people in around April. But I absolutely will be a part of that. It's a great way. One of the things I find is in any profession with a kind of standards committee, like a body of standards and ethics committee or whatever, where you have accreditation. So coaching, law, medicine, accounting, blah, 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 blah. Project management, I think, is one of these. Anytime you have something like that, you almost always require continuing education units, CEUs. And most of the continuing education units I find are kind of lame. They're a lot of sitting there getting told stuff you kind of already know, or like might not know quite the nuance of, and it's like, great, but you probably could have picked that up over the course of like reading a book for 2 hours. And it's not to say there's not value, because in requiring the credit, you actually do the work to go and read the book for a couple hours. But it's just like, these CEUs are it's not fun. It's not thrilling. It doesn't set you alight. And so we try to provide CEUs in a cool way in the Forge, where people can actually get transformation as they gather these credits. And that's what I think is available at the Essence of Mastery. All right. Let's talk about some other stuff. David asks a question. Tommy's looking at that profile. I think of it as Morale. Only 2 friends. Profile was put up yesterday. Maybe a fake account. Quite likely. As a general rule, I'm very easy for people to connect with. You just send me a message and say, hey, you're cool. I like hearing what you're up to. Can we talk? And the answer is yes. What tends to happen is people just make a friend request, and they've got like this, like 3 friends. They've been put up yesterday. Those friends are marketing the same thing that this person is marketing, and it just becomes very easy to hit ignore. It's nothing. Oh, looks like I got a parcel. They just dropped a parcel off. So I ignore those ones, but it's not hard to connect with me. It's quite easy. Let's talk about David's question here. So David Medina asks, can the act of distinguishing, which I'll clarify in a sec, can distinguishing itself become a strategy and get in the way of our leadership and transformation? If so, in what moments might that be true? So distinguishing is kind of the act of, if I show up late, for example, to a meeting, the typical thing is sort of like a bit of a fuck me energy, like, oh, I'm so sorry, things are crazy, everything sucks, and the energy people tend to get is like, I'm besieged, I know I suck, I'm a piece of crap, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. That's kind of the energy. That's not very good energy to model as a leader, and it also doesn't leave us really open to anything, because how's anyone going to provide feedback when I'm so busy beating up on myself, right? They'd have to be a masochist. So what a leader practices is instead of just telling a sad story about how they suck, so to speak, they distinguish. And when we distinguish, we're looking below the story, right? Here's why I'm late and it's not my fault, to like, what can I see about the way I'm showing up in my life that had it go this way? So I'm practicing taking some responsibility by looking at the way things went a particular way. So I might see, oh, well, I set an alarm for myself 5 minutes ahead of time, but I just ignored it and like went back to what I was doing. And then that had me be late. Or I might be like, frankly, I was just tired from the day and I didn't want to show up. And I felt resentful that I had to show up. And so I just hung out here for a little while longer. Or. There's a million reasons. But what we're looking for from a leader is their capacity to identify how is this getting created so as to have it go different next time. That's distinct from the typical way we are about things, which is, fuck, I suck, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, this won't happen again. If you read leadership books about this sort of stuff, if you watch leadership content, most of it tends to be in this direction. The idea that the conceit of a lot of this sort of stuff is like, oh, you just need to call attention to it and be firm with people. If you've ever read Get a Grip, Traction, there's a part I love to hate on in that book where like this person's perpetually late, they're chronically late, and the guy, the magic wonder meister who's helping these people become leaders, sees the person come in late and is like, hey, here, if you're not early, you're late. And so it's time to start being early. It's time to start being on time. And that's all it took. The guy then shows up on time. That's just all you've done is introduced a new stick called your approval or your story about if you're not early, you're late over top of them. And now you're trying to impose that, and they're going to try to white knuckle their way through it. And what they'll do is they will use that to force themselves to be on time enough until that fades into the background, and then they'll start becoming late again. There's no leadership for them in that. There's just your imposition over top of them. The leadership opportunity is for them to do the work, which is harder. For us to be like, to call to their attention, hey, I notice you're late again. What can you distinguish that's having it go this way? And then have them get clear on that for themselves so they can choose something different. So that's an example of distinguishing. David's question then is there a time when that work, when distinguishing something is actually the next step, actually the next thing in the way of your leadership? That's what's blocking you. And the answer is yes, absolutely. There is nothing, well, it's all sacred and none of it's sacred. So there's no breakthrough you can create. There's no like thing I can share or that you read from a book or that you learned from a leader that your ego can't take and then use as the way to stop you from creating the next breakthrough. And remember, there's perpetual breakthroughs. It's like a mountain with no top. You just have to learn to love to climb or hate it and stop climbing. That's an option too. I don't want to be on this mountain called leadership. So the way distinguishing looks when it starts to become a crutch is when people start to like perpetually show up late and then be like, here's what I can see. I did this. I know I keep doing that. And I really blah, 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 blah. And it won't happen again. And then it happens again. And they show up and they're like, here's what I can see this time. And I really get my impact. And I'm sorry that I'm leaving that with anyone. And let me know if you need me to do anything to clean up. And then they show up again, late. And they say, here's what I can distinguish, blah, blah, blah. So at this point, what's happening now is rather than taking the next step, which is addressing this behavior, so that it stops happening. They are now using distinguishing what's happening as kind of like the make it all right with you. Oh, got it. I've got to make it all right with Adam, and the way I make it all right with Adam is I distinguish how I'm showing up, and I apologize for the impact, and I be open to people telling me about the impact. That's fine until it's not. Until it starts to become the thing, the pattern, that has this keep going the same way and not actually clearing up, changing the behavior. And so that'll happen pretty typically with people. One of the first stages when we're working with leaders in the Forge is to start to have them present to the impact they're having in the space. That's unpleasant work, usually. That's sort of like, if we stick with that lateness, like, yeah, I showed up late, and we gather feedback. How does this leave you feeling that so-and-so showed up late? Well, I feel kind of like, why the fuck should I be here on time? And then the next person's like, well, I kind of feel like annoyed at her. Like, we're making this commitment, her, him, whoever, and they're not showing up. And then, well, I feel blah, 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 blah. So at this point, the person's getting, present to the impact that their way of being is having. That's important as a leader, because often we're pretty oblivious to it, especially when we're caught in the fuck me, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. All we're present to is that we suck, not the actual impact we're having on the people that we're supporting in leadership. But then, usually at some point in the Forge, that becomes the new trick. I'm so sorry that I'm late, I'm so sorry that I did this, I'm so sorry that I got angry and spewed that anger into the group. I'm totally open to hearing about my impact, please share it with me. No. That's the point where we have to be like, no, you find that out, and what are you going to do to have this go differently going forward so that we don't have to keep being in this conversation? So to answer your question, David, which is, well, that's the first part of your question, which is absolutely. Distinguishing can absolutely become a strategy and get in the way of your leadership. If so, in what moments might that be true? When we're caught in a pattern. When there's a way things continue to go, and the tendency or the thing that people are doing is distinguishing, and it doesn't seem to be making things go any different. It's not having things go anywhere other than just repeating themselves. So we're never, as leaders, we're never looking at the thing someone's doing. It would never be like they're distinguishing and their eyes go to the left, and that means, therefore, that this is in the way of their leadership. It's never like, well, I did this for a good reason. There's always a good reason. What we're looking for is what's the overall pattern we're noticing with this person. So at first it might be like the pattern we notice is they show up late and then they hate on themselves. And then the next pattern might be they show up late and they say they're open to hearing about their impact, but they're not. And the next pattern might be we notice they're still showing up late and they're now using I'm okay to hear about how I suck, tell me about my impact, to make it okay that they're still being late. Great, what's the next thing? So we're always looking with altitude at the overall pattern that's happening, and that tells us, is this moving the person forward, or has it just got them in the same kind of dance at this point? So that's how. Absolutely everything can become a crutch. That's your ego's job. Your ego's job is to hold you right here where you are. And so last year, or like in the last decade of your life, or yesterday, you created a bunch of breakthroughs that got you here, wherever here is for you. And now your ego is using all of that stuff to keep you here. And tomorrow, or next week, or in the next 10 years of your life, you will create other breakthroughs that will bring you there. But once you've done that, your ego will then grab a hold of those and use those to keep you there. So one of my coaches used to say, like, it can be good to imagine this like a series of concentric circles, ever expanding outwards. And we're creating the breakthrough to move from this circle to this circle. We're expanding our capacity to create and be with and live a life at this level. And then once we get there, oh no, now those tools are in the way. Now I gotta let go of those so I can create the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So again, mountain with no top, never stops. All right, well, we'll take a sip of tea, and then we'll talk about this question from Poppy. This is a bit of a longer one, but I think it's a really juicy, so I'm going to share it. I'm going to read and try to summarize or paraphrase what Poppy's written here a little bit. So they write, hi there, I just turned 30, and responsibility is currently one of the topics that upsets me the most. Juicy. Caliente. Let me be very straightforward with this. I simply did not ask to be born. Why do I have to be responsible of a life I didn't ask for? I live with a dog. She is my responsibility, and I have to do things I don't want to do in order to give her the best possible life because it was my choice to adopt her. That said, it is my duty and my pleasure to go to work every day to find the means to support her unconditionally. But my parents never considered this. They never gave me the chance to study or gave me advice and opportunities for my life to be bearable. It's me who has made terrible choices in life out of unconscious decisions because nobody ever taught me I could do better, differently, and I've been doing what I can for 12 years. I'm extremely mad at life. I never find an open door that helps me build a better reality so I get to enjoy my own existence. I'm willing to keep trying differently, but I'm exhausted of having to wear a mask, to fit in jobs that won't pay me enough to live on my own, or having to lie to myself, lowering my expectations to avoid frustration. I am being responsible towards my own life. I truly do not understand how that is supposed to empower me when it feels more like it's draining me. I agree to effort with reward, not just to cover human rights necessities, and I'm not a machine made to work 12-hour shifts. I'm not sure if the whole quote-unquote take charge of your own life isn't just another scam to keep people bowing down to an unfair system, or if it's truly the only way to happiness. Plus, I don't even relate to taking on more responsibility to creating more freedom. Quite the opposite. I'd really appreciate if you have some comments on this since I liked your replies to other messages. It's a good topic, right? So, this is a challenging one for a few reasons. The thing that I would assert is most challenging about this question we have is this person is saying, I am being responsible towards my life, and my assertion is no, they're not. That's not a blame. That's not wrong. But I imagine for this person who's signed as Poppy, I imagine for Poppy it's going to feel like a blame. Like, how dare you? I'm doing everything to be responsible. And I would assert, no, you're not. Lovingly, I would put that in front of your face as a starting point. Because until we get to that truth, until someone can confront that, nothing will work. It's like if I'm punching myself in the back of my head every 10 minutes and complaining to you about my headaches, and you say, well, the problem is that you're punching yourself in the back of the head, and I say, no, it's not. I stopped doing that years ago. And then I punch myself in the back of the head and complain to you about a headache. It won't work. And it doesn't matter how insistent I am that I'm not punching myself in the back of the head if that's what I'm doing. And in fact, the more I insist that that's not what I'm doing, it's not that, help me with something else, the more we're just going to get tangled up and nothing will be able to really work or shift. So this is the starting point for the conversation is lovingly, Poppy, no, you are not. And I want to invite you and all of us that have some experience of this in our life to let that be okay. As long as we're sort of like, it's wrong for me to be irresponsible, for me not to want to take responsibility, or for me not to blah, 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 blah. Hey, Maria, nice to see you. As long as we're insistent that that's wrong, it means that we can't allow ourselves to just be where we are. And as long as we can't allow ourselves to be where we are, we're fucked. Because I'm going to be punching myself in the back of the head. It's wrong. No, only a moron would punch themselves in the back of the head. Ah, my head aches. I'm not punching myself in the back of the head. Only a moron. It gets so messy. So the starting point for this conversation has to be, it is perfectly acceptable to be unwilling to take responsibility for our lives or part of our lives. It is perfectly acceptable. In fact, it is a perfect, sacred choice to be at a place where we are at the effect of what's happened. At the effect in our life. I feel this way because of X. And so that's where we begin this conversation. And so some places I would point to in this particular thing where there is a lack of willingness to be responsible is I was never given the chance to study or advice or opportunities for my life to be bearable. No one ever taught me, and so I've been doing the best I can for 12 years. I wasn't asked if I wanted to be born. I have to wear a mask to fit in at jobs that won't pay me enough to live on my own. Or I have to lie to myself, lowering my expectations to avoid frustration. So these are all examples of places where someone is not yet able and or willing to take responsibility for the experience they're in. It doesn't mean that when someone starts to take responsibility that things will get better. In fact, they'll probably get worse. Anytime you start to make a transformational shift and show up differently compared to how you have shown up in your life up to this point, things will almost certainly take a dip, because you've learned to like manage all of the way life goes, including the way you show up inside of your life, given how it currently is. So anytime you start to create a shift, you're going to drop some balls. Stuff's not going to go the way you want it to. And you're probably going to be like, this is worse. So the places that someone could start to practice with this, well, the first place would be to just come to terms with the fact, like, actually I'm unwilling or unable to practice responsibility here, and to hold that with sacred grace. As soon as we're trying to tell ourselves we should take responsibility, we're screwed, because that's not how responsibility works. It cannot work that way. From trying to impose responsibility on myself or someone else, it will not work. Just like shouting at a flower to open doesn't work. That's not how it works. Screaming at someone to open will never work. And so the first step has to be to find grace for ourselves and people that are unable or unwilling at any moment in time, in any area of their life, to just be responsible for how it's going. And from there, we can start to like really sit in seeing where we are. Oh yeah, it's true. I'm a victim to my parents, or I'm a victim to this guy at work, or I'm a victim to my story about how jobs have to be. That's okay. From there, what starts to become available is the opportunity to notice the impact of that. So what we're doing is we're first making it so that it's okay internally for us to choose one or the other. We're letting go of this idea, it's wrong to choose to be at the effect of something in my life. It's only right to be responsible, so that we can really get that there's a choice one way or the other. And from that place, we can start to notice the impact of our choices. Oh, here, I am not being responsible for how I show up at job interviews. I'm instead being at the effect of a story I have about what is required at jobs. Okay. So what's the impact of that? Well, one is I start to work, I show up with a mask. Okay, great. And then what's the impact of that? Well, sometimes I'm more likely to get hired if people especially wouldn't like who I am authentically. Great. So avoid rejection, short term, might get a job I want. What's the impact that follows on from that? Well, then I end up in a job wearing a mask and hating myself and other people for making me do it. Okay, great. And then what? Well, I feel kind of powerless and like I'm just a pawn in this system because no one really wants to know how I am, how I'm doing, or what's true for me. Okay, great. So we can start to see what we're fully choosing with our eyes wide open, with total clarity, as opposed to feeling like to not even seeing we're making a choice and then putting all of that on the world around us. And all that does is it keeps us stuck. So the first stage to finding an empowered relationship with responsibility is being responsible for the fact that we are choosing something other than responsibility. And being responsible to love ourselves for making that choice. And from there, the seed can start to grow. So that's like, a lot of people hear me talk about responsibility, and they hear it as a should, or they hear it as like something other than a choice. And they don't hear the sacredness that must be guided towards when we aren't being responsible. And it's sort of like, if you want to find and create a relationship of complete love with yourself and the rest of the world, I need to do a little more setup. I just realized that as I started down this path. So this is a bit of an analog, so we can kind of see it, and then we'll bring it back to responsibility. So a lot of people want to have an experience of being loving with themselves and the rest of the world. And as they go about trying to create this, the thing they notice is their hateful thoughts. And then what they do is they try to kill those hateful thoughts. Stop doing that. That's so unhealthy. Conversation like that internally when those thoughts show up. Stop that. Cancel. You shouldn't say that sort of stuff to yourself. Why do you say that stuff to yourself? What they are doing is they are saying they want to practice love, and then when a part of themselves show up that they have a hard time loving, they hate it. That's not how you get to love. And so the really challenging mind twister of this, the counterintuitive kind of hard to get ourselves around and harder yet to practice, is when those hateful thoughts show up, we have to bring love to them. Not love to them so that they go away. That's just hate disguised as love. Love to them like, it is perfectly fine that these thoughts are here. In fact, I embrace these thoughts. These thoughts are as much a sacred part of myself as every other thought that I have. I am willing to practice bringing love to this part of myself. I am ruthless, and I love that about myself. How does that serve me? How does that support other people? How can I find this part of myself as every bit as sacred as the part of myself that I love already? That's a tough path to walk. So that's what we have to do if we want a life of love. If we want to develop a relationship with ourselves and other people that is really, truly, deeply loving. Now, if we bring that back to responsibility, the same kind of counterintuitive game takes shape. We have to learn to be responsible for the places we are unwilling to be responsible. And so the way that looks is first coming to an acceptance of it. I can't be responsible for something if I'm closing my eyes and saying I definitely wouldn't do that. And then I have to kind of like, to be responsible, I have to accept that that's the choice I'm making. That's part of responsibility, is that there is a choice here. Sure, my parents did X, Y, and Z when they raised me. And sure, my dog did this. And sure, the last 7 jobs did this. But I still have a choice. And I can be responsible that, notwithstanding all of this stuff that happened, I'm the one making the choice in front of me today, right now. And it's not wrong however I'm choosing, but this is the choice I'm making, and these are the consequences of it. And I'm going to sit here and just be with that fact. And so what we're doing is we're starting to be responsible for the places and ways that we are irresponsible, that we are unwilling to be responsible, that we are victimized, and learning to be loving with ourselves in that place. And as you do that, what's happening is you're practicing being responsible in the moment with whatever is showing up. So that responsibility no longer becomes a requirement of anything around you, not a requirement of any circumstances around you. It becomes an opportunity, a stand that you can take no matter where you are at, where you find yourself, what you feel, who's going on, what's going on around you. That's hard work. It's much harder, that work, than the work where it's like, I'm responsible because it's so clear that this happened and it's so clear it's my fault. That's how we kind of visualize being responsible. I can be responsible when it's clear factually that I did the thing. I'm very responsible. No, you're not. You're conditionally responsible. You're responsible 20% of the time when it's obvious that it's on you. The rest of the time you have no access to responsibility. Can you be responsible for that fact? Can you be responsible for the lens through which you look at responsibility? So it gets very meta, but it's important because that's where the work lies. The work lies in these places where it's like so counterintuitive, it's obvious. Not here. Yes, there, right there. So that's what there is to practice, Poppy. And really, in all of this, it's an opportunity, most of all, to love yourself, whatever you're choosing. To notice what we're choosing and then love ourselves and hold that as a perfectly acceptable, fine choice. Something sacred. The game here is to hold it the same way you would hold a decision made by God. The same way you would make a decision made by any, whatever spirit is for you. Like, oh, wow, that was the choice. There is absolutely a beautiful, profound reason that makes complete sense for that choice. I'm going to hold that sacred. That will change our lives. All right, cool. Nailed it. Thank you for your question and your comment, Poppy. It's a really good one. I think responsibility is one of the love, responsibility. These are like 2 really big, really tough topics because our collective story, the context that is in the zeitgeist about them, pushes us out to this conditional way of doing things, which then reinforces the divide we feel internally and project externally, and then keeps us unable to like come together, to reintegrate with each other, because we can't reintegrate with ourselves. And so responsibility and love are like 2 super important topics. I really think that this is a lot of where the work of leadership lies right now. That's what I'm noticing in the world. All right, well, let's do one more topic. Well, what do I have? I've got learning to be in relationship with something. I feel like I talk about that a lot. Getting what you want by being with what you want to avoid. I wrote a blog post about this. reading the energy and are they open to it. I think that will be what we talk about here. Yeah. So there was a time, and there will be more times in the future, no doubt about it, when I had a interaction with someone, they wanted to hire me, and then kind of got to like, no, I'm a no. And given that we'd had probably 2 or 3 hours of conversation over the phone, and then they emailed me that way, there was some stuff I could see. I could kind of see like, well, you're kind of choosing into fear this way, and you're doing this that way, and like, there's some stuff this person needs to get. I want to make sure that they get it before they leave. I want to provide it for them. And I remember, like, part of this was trained in me because the place I was taught leadership, often as people would like move on from the training program I led along with other people, we would sometimes like give them something as they were leaving. So sort of like, well, I want to make sure they understand their impact on their way out so that they at least get that from this interaction. Or something along those lines. And so I would send this email to the person that I was talking to, or I'd have these conversations with people as they're leaving, kind of like, give them the thing on their way out. And it didn't, like, I was left frustrated at them. I was annoyed. I had judgment of them. This eyebrow's doing some crazy stuff. There we go. Get in there. Behave, eyebrow. Have you guys ever noticed like old actors with like crazy long eyebrows? Like, I get that eyebrows just grow as we age. I've discovered that truth. But it's interesting to me when I see older actors where that's the choice they made. They're just like, you know what? My eyebrows are going to be fucking crazy. That's going to be me. That's what you get when you hire this guy. That's always intriguing to me. Anyhow, so I would do this at these people. Really, I was doing it at them. And then I would be frustrated because they were closed, they wouldn't receive it, or I had some judgment of them. Or I'd be trying to work with someone and like, I would get myself to a point where I was like, fine, fuck you. Like, I can't make a difference for you, so what the fuck? I tried, blah, blah, blah. And so I would bring this to my coach, and she and I started to look at this stuff. And the question she asked me, I can remember a point where I sent her like 2 or 3. And the question she would ask me after looking at our conversations was like, so what are you present to over there? And I'd be like, I don't know, like, I'm present to the fact that they're scared and not willing to lean into their thing and like just making a choice from their fear. And so like what my coach reflected to me was, it seems like what you're present to is like what you're right about. Like, this is your story about what's going on for them, and that's what you're present to. And I was like, yeah, but I am right about it. She's like, well, okay, but like, are you open to exploring a little bit beyond that? Do you want to look a little further to see if there might be something you're not seeing? I was like, yes, okay, fine, I'll do it, whatever. And so she reflected to me. She's like, Adam, what I see is someone who's scared and vulnerable, and I noticed that they like really expressed a lot of appreciation for the time you gave them. And I also see that they're kind of like doing their best to tell you not now. And I'm like, yeah, but they're telling me not now because of blah, blah, blah. And she's like, well, that's your story about it. And so there was like this getting caught on what I was right about, what I could see as being correct. And so the first opportunity in this for me was to start to see like, oh, I can see a thing, not the thing. I can see one thing, but it's not the thing. I can see a path that they might walk, but it's not necessarily the path. Who's to say that I'm right about what I see? Maybe I'm not. Or maybe they're just not even present to that in this moment. And whilst I might see it, and there might even be some truth to it, who knows, that's a bit slippery for me, but even if, it doesn't matter if they can't see that right now. They're not present to it. So that was the first thing, was for me to start to see, oh wow, there's a lot that I am right about, attached to, sticking to, and like then imposing on these people. The second, more important thing for me was this attachment I had of like hitting them with this on their way out. And what I couldn't see was that was ultimately about me. And the way it was about me is because if I slow down and I really get present with that person, what's real for them is they're not open in this moment. They're not a yes, they're not an invitation for feedback, for coaching, for reflection. Kind of like if you go up to a cashier who's having a bad day and you tell them, smile, you look nicer when you do it. Or you should smile more. That's a reflection. And with some advice baked into it. But really what you're doing is you're saying like, you should stop frowning, you should smile more. And the reflection is like, you're frowning a lot, you're not smiling enough. If someone's having a bad day, like if you're having a bad day and someone tells you that, how do you imagine that would impact you? Right? It lands as a bit of a fuck you. You're probably going to respond with a bit of a fuck off. Who the fuck are you to tell me what to do? We're not open in those moments. So it doesn't matter how well intended what I have to offer is. And frankly, if you heard the first part of the story, it wasn't even really that well intended. It was all wrapped up in my own stuff and rightness. But let's assume I moved through that. There's still the issue that it doesn't matter how well I intend it if the person's not an opening for it. Offering people feedback or insight or a reflection when they're not an opening for it is for you rather than for them. And this is a really tough bridge that we have to learn to cross as leaders and coaches, because we get hooked. We're like, but they need this. They need to get this impact, because otherwise when are they going to get it? But the thing that we don't get is they're not going to get it. You telling it to them when they're closed will not land. It won't come across that bridge. So it doesn't matter how insistent you are that they need to get this. It's not up to you. It's up to them. And the beautiful thing about this lens we can begin to look through with people, which is, are they open? Are they closed? It is one, it gives us a different place to look when leaders and coaches start to settle into, well, they're just uncoachable or they're just unwilling to let me make an impact. And what it allows us to do from a position of responsibility is start to ask ourselves the question, hold on, excuse me, how am I being that has this person closed? And how would there be for me to show up that might allow them to open a little bit more? Well, it's none of my business. I have no power. I can't be the one to force them open. Yeah, but you can get that there's a dynamic. As Andrew's just put in the chat, there's a partnership. Always. Any interaction with someone is a partnership between you and them. So from that question, it allows us to come back over here and take responsibility. How am I being in this moment that has this person showing up closed? If I really care about giving them this feedback, what would there be for me to do, be? How would there be for me to speak? How would there be for me to act that might allow them to be a little bit more open? And we have to put our attention there and hang out in that place. And as soon as we kind of shrug our shoulders and be like, fine, fuck you, I can't be bothered with you, that's where we shrug off the responsibility. That's where we're like, it's not over here for me. This is for them. I don't want to do that. Why do I have to do the work? You don't. But if you really care as much as you say you do about providing this feedback, then it's your responsibility. It's not their responsibility unless they decide they really want the feedback in that moment. And then it's their job to open. So this is tricky. This is really tricky as people start to learn the speaking of leadership, the jargon, the words of coaching and leadership, is because they start to try to like push this onto people without actually being able to distinguish how they're being and how the other person is being. And when the people don't receive the wisdom that they got from the book on leadership that they read, they just assume they're uncoachable and slap them with that label. The label, they're uncoachable, it's kind of like gaslighting a bit. That label actually is a mirror that comes right back and hits you in the forehead. Not being responsible is what it says. Gaslighting is very similar, because the notion of gaslighting is like free from responsibility. It puts it all there on the other person. The craziness I feel is the other person's fault. It's all the other person. It's a very dangerous term, at least if what we're committed to is leadership and responsibility. It's a real like pernicious term because it kind of lets me out off the hook. Uncoachable, gaslighting, these are terms that let us off the hook. They won't let me make any impact. I'm off the hook. It's not me, it's them. So we want to be cautious about this, and I share this story because I've been noticing it showing up for me lately and noticing that I got to keep practicing. There's new places where I can show up with people or new levels of sophistication where I'm causing people to close. And I got to practice like, okay, how do I have to be with this person? What is there to do? Maybe right now all there is to do is to just listen to them and get them and set aside what I think they need to hear for the moment. Maybe they'll hear that from someone else 3 weeks later after I've just listened to them. Sometimes that's the work. I'm just going to read what you've written here, Andrew, before we wind down. Andrew says, there is so much I could speak to with some of the reflections that were shared this week in the Forge. I'm not going to bring that here, of course, but what I'll share is what I'm present to when reflections hit blind spots and the potential impact of it. Yeah, it's really helpful for us to recognize whenever we make a reflection that's going to create new awareness, it's often going to bounce off of someone's blind spot. And that, it's easy to get frustrated as that as a human because we're like, oh, you're not getting it. And we don't realize they can't. They're doing their best. They can't get it. They can't, literally, no matter how hard you try, you're not going to be able to see your optical blind spot. And the same is true for your cognitive one. The only way we can start to get it is through trust. Trusting what's being offered to us. Trusting the scientist who tells us your eye has an optical blind spot. And starting to see through that trust the truth of it. And trust is something that is like, it's given, first of all, but I can always be responsible for how am I showing up that has this person not able to trust me. Andrew, you're finishing up by saying, sounds like partnership to me. A person might be open to receiving the reflection and then reject what is being reflected. It's a dynamic, ongoing thing. Yes, sir. It absolutely is. Okay, I got someone coming over to check out my house to talk to us about renovations. It doesn't look like they're here yet. But we're going to wind down a little earlier today, an 11 o'clock finish. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in, checking this out, and we'll catch you guys in a couple of weeks. I hope you have an amazing time off from me, and I look forward to seeing you when I'm back. Peace.